Most towns have local legends. Ashford had Station 14. Nobody knew exactly when the story started. Some people said the broadcast began in the 1990s. Others claim they started immediately after the station shut down in 1987. The only thing everyone agreed on was this: Station 14 was gone. The tower was abandoned, the building was empty, and the equipment had been destroyed. Yet somehow, people still heard it. The first reports were dismissed. Someone heard music coming from an old radio. Someone else heard a weather report. Another person claimed they heard a voice speaking through a police scanner. Nothing unusual, at least not at first. Then the recorded started appearing. People from different parts of town had captured the same broadcast, the same voice, the same words, the same strange station. And every recording began the same way. "Good evening, Ashford." The voice sounded calm, professional, like a local radio host reading the evening news. Then came the strange part. The reports weren't current. They weren't about today. They weren't even about yesterday. They were about tomorrow. The broadcast described events that hadn't happened yet. A power outage, a bridge closure, a warehouse fire, a school cancellation, a burst water main. Nothing supernatural, nothing impossible. Just tomorrow's news. And somehow, it was always correct. People began collecting records, entire folders filled with them, hundreds of broadcasts, thousands of predictions. Over time, the station became famous. Not outside of Ashford, only inside. Visitors rarely believed the stories. Residents rarely talked about them. But everybody knew. Every storm carried the possibility of another broadcast. The strangest part wasn't the predictions. It was what happened at the end. Every broadcast ended with names. No explanation, no introduction, no context. Just names. 5 names, sometimes 10, sometimes 20. The announcer would read them slowly. Then the signal would end. Nobody knew what they meant. Years passed. The names became part of the mystery. People ignored them. Until someone noticed something. One of the names belonged to a local teacher. At the time, she was alive, healthy, still working, still living in town. 3 years later, she died. Nobody thought much of it, until another name matched. Then another, then another. Soon people began checking old records. What they discovered terrified them. Every name eventually appeared in local obituaries. Every single one. Sometimes months later, sometimes years later. But eventually, every name was there. The station wasn't predicting accidents. It wasn't predicting disasters. It was predicting deaths. The discovery changed everything. Suddenly, people wanted recordings. Old recordings, new recordings, anything they could find. The town became obsessed. People searched through garages, basements, storage units, attics, anything that might contain an old tape. The collection grew. Then one researcher made a disturbing discovery. Some names never appeared. A handful of names existed in the broadcast but never appeared in death records. Nobody knew why. The names simply stopped. No obituary, no funeral, no record, nothing. As if those people had vanished completely. The mystery deepened. Then someone found the original station archives. Boxes filled with paperwork, schedules, advertisements, engineering reports, everything from Station 14's final years. Most of it was boring. Then they found a transcript. The final broadcast, October 1987. The station's last night on air. People expected answers. Instead, they found another mystery. The transcript wasn't weather reports. It wasn't music schedules. It wasn't local news. It was names. Page after page. Thousands of names. Names stretching decades into the future. Names belonging to people who hadn't even been born yet. The list continued for hundreds of pages. Nobody could explain it. Nobody could explain who wrote it. Nobody could explain how the names were chosen. But one thing was clear. The station wasn't creating new broadcasts. The announcer wasn't predicting anything. He was reading from a list that had existed since 1987. That discovery frightened people more than anything else, because it meant every future broadcast was already written. Every future name already existed. Everything had already been decided. Or at least, that was what some people believed. Years later, another storm rolled across Ashford. Lightning flashed, rain hammered the streets, the power flickered. Then radios across town activated at exactly 8:14 p.m. For the first time in years, the familiar voice returned. "Good evening, Ashford." People recorded the broadcast, just like always. Weather reports, traffic reports, storm warnings. Then came the names. The voice read them calmly, one by one, then paused. For several seconds, there was only static. Then the announcer spoke again. A name nobody recognized. A name that didn't exist anywhere in town. A name that appeared in no records, no databases, no archives. Just one name. Then the broadcast ended. Months passed. Nothing happened. People forgot about it. Until a family moved into Ashford. They had recently arrived from another state. Nobody knew them. Nobody recognized them. But when the residents introduced themselves, they heard something that made their blood run cold. The father's name. It matched the final name from the broadcast. Exactly. That was 3 years ago. No one knows what happened afterwards. The family eventually left town. Or at least people say they did. No one remembers seeing them leave. No one remembers where they went. But every storm still makes residents nervous. Because Station 14 has never explained the names. And somewhere in those old recordings, there may still be thousands left to read. Including names that haven't happened yet. Including names that might belong to people listening right now. And every time thunder rolls across Ashford, radios throughout town remain turned to a frequency that officially stopped broadcasting nearly 40 years ago. Waiting for the next name.